I don't even have the notation for it, so I don't even know if I'm going to be able to show the whole game, but holy did I save this game out of nowhere.
I played a 5-round classical tournament with players in the open section. I was seeded around 9th, and with the World Open coming up next month, I wanted to see where my chess actually stands. In round 1, I had black against an 1800. In this position, my opponent plays knight to d4, and here I have two options. So I want to get this knight from f8 into the game. However, my bishop's in the way, and I don't really want to go to g6 because the bishop can just snap take, and I didn't really like this position for me. I thought I had to go backwards. However, that was a mistake because of my opponent's move a4, and this led to a complete destruction of my queenside. And after a couple more moves, I found myself in a lot of trouble, and rook b8 was a blunder. However, my opponent failed to capitalize, and after a couple of moves, I found myself right back in the game. In this position, under a lot of time trouble, I played queen d8, which completely blunders this forced sequence of moves. And in this position, my opponent needed to play rook a7 with the idea of rook to c7, winning that pawn. However, my opponent blunders with rook a6, and this lets me back in the game, and after a couple more moves, we found ourselves at a very, very solid draw. In round 2, I was paired against a 1750 as white. In this position, my opponent decided to go for bishop takes b1, which just seems like an odd move. However, it is a line in some positions. However, this is not one of them, and I quickly got a very big initiative. After I took back and played rook d1, the queen's under attack, I go back attacking the pawn, and then I go bishop e2 with the idea of bishop f3 targeting the queen side. After my opponent plays e5, I take on c6, I go bishop c4, attacking the f7 pawn, forcing black to go to c7, but then after I chase and I just castle cleanly, black has absolutely no moves. And after just one more move played, my opponent resigned. In the third round, I was paired against a 2060 as black. In this position, I had a much better game plan. All I needed to do was move my pawn up the board and just focus on the king side, because my opponent's king was really weak and had a lot of targets to attack with all my pieces facing the king side. However, I go for the wrong plan of action, and after just a couple moves, my advantage seems to disappear completely. In this position, I need to target this d4 pawn before white can crash open on the queen side. I wanted to go rook d7. However, the correct move would have been rook d8. And as you can see, after rook d7, takes, the reason why rook d8 was better is because after knight c5, my rook wouldn't be attacked if it was on d8. And now I take, and my opponent has two options. My opponent can either take with the d pawn or the b pawn. The d pawn would be a mistake because it blocks this b file, which would be really important to bring a rook into and pressure my king and the bishop. However, my opponent does in fact take with the d pawn and allows me to survive, and after a couple more moves, we happily took a draw. In round 4, I was paired against an 1830 and I had the white pieces. In this position, my opponent blundered with the move c6. This hangs a straight pawn. The reason being, if black takes, which is what happened in the game, I have rook to d8 check, and after rook to e8, I can take on f6 first, and as you can see, my rook attacks his rook, and even though his bishop could take my bishop, I would then go on to take the rook. And after this position, I'm up a clean pawn. In this position, I had to bring my knight to g4, and to move it forward into the position. Maybe go for this, and maybe to go into f6 or go bishop f6, and to try and go for some forward movement. However, I went backwards with knight to d1, and this led to a very complicated position because my opponent had a lot of counterplay. His pieces are coming at my king and all my targets, and so even though I'm up a pawn, it doesn't mean anything in this situation. After a couple of moves, me and my position enter this position. We both don't have that much time, and even though I'm up a pawn, I had very little hope in this position because it is opposite colored bishops, so I can never trade the rooks, and I don't really see a way for me to go through, even though the computer thinks that white is slightly better. We were playing on in this position until my opponent struck on the king side with h5, and when I saw this, I was really happy because I was like, okay, I think I might have a chance to win this now. I went rook g3, and after takes, bishop f3, I played rook to f4 attacking the bishop went back. I could take rook f6, And in this position, I was very happy that I ended up getting a very clean, calm position. My opponent went back to f7, and after this, I had a very easy game to convert. Played king b3 to pick up the pawn, and my opponent resigned. In the final round, I was paired against a 2088, and I had the black pieces. A win would get me second place, and a draw would only get me a tie for third. In this position, I played bishop takes c5, and after my opponent took back, I had the sneaky move knight a6, so I don't have to damage my pawn structure, and my opponent said that he missed this move, which is why he went into this line in the first place. And this allowed me to completely equalize from the opening. After I played rook a to d8, my opponent went for the tactical shot of knight g5. However, I had calculated this and had seen that I actually think I might be the one benefiting from this sequence of moves. I took, my opponent took, I go knight c5, f4 to protect the e5 pawn, and here I thought I had to play queen g6. However, the computer says queen to e7 is better. I kick the bishop out, and then I double up the rooks, and my queen overall is better. In fact, the computer thinks g5 here is a great move. I personally don't think I'm ever playing this move in a game ever. So I don't really know what to think of this line, so I'm not too fussed about going queen g6. At this point, we reached a more comfortable endgame for me. There aren't clear weaknesses for me to target, so I didn't really know where to push and how to push. However, I did have a slight time advantage, and I did want to try to capitalize on this position, because again, I was trying to go for the win. In this position, after my opponent played king g2, I realized that there isn't really much for me to do. I don't have any possible way to continue on confidently without risking. So here I played f6. I was like, okay, let's see if I can create any sort of weakness I can try to attack later on. However, he took, and after he played king f3, he offered a draw. And I spent 20 minutes on this draw offer. And in the end, I decided to take the draw. I saw no way forward. The computer does say black is slightly better. However, I was calculating a lot of lines and I couldn't find a way for me to go forward. And I was starting to get low on time as well. So I decided to take the draw. And for the final tournament standings, I placed tied for third with 3.5 out of 5. Very happy that I didn't lose, but I'm a little bit upset with the fact that I didn't manage to win more games. But yeah, very exciting lead up to the World Open. Hoping to really perform there, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one.